13 famous gay celebrities lost to AIDS, their names lit up Hollywood, yet their endings were shrouded in silence and fear. Behind the glamour, their final days became cautionary tales the world was never meant to forget. Stay with us, because each story hides a truth darker than the spotlight ever revealed, and by the end, you will see why their legacy still haunts us today. Number 1. Freddie Mercury. On November the 24th, 1991, in London, the world woke to heartbreaking news. Freddie Mercury, the electrifying voice of Queen, had died just one day after confirming publicly that he was battling AIDS. The timing made the announcement even more shocking. One moment he stood as an untouchable icon of rock, the next he was gone, leaving fans and fellow musicians reeling in disbelief. The headlines blared with his name, and candlelight vigils erupted outside his home, as if the entire planet had paused to mourn the loss of a singular star. Born Farrokh Bulsara in Zanzibar in 1946, Freddie Mercury built his identity with boldness. He moved to England, studied art, and then changed the sound of rock forever when he joined Brian May and Roger Taylor to form Queen. His stage presence was theatrical, commanding, and impossible to ignore. With an unmatched vocal range and a flair for dramatics, he turned songs like Bohemian Rhapsody, We Are the Champions, and Somebody to Love into anthems that transcended generations. Offstage, he lived with the same intensity, surrounding himself with music, art, and friends who formed his chosen family. The disease began its cruel toll in the late 1980s. Observers noticed his once powerful figure grow thinner, his public appearances fewer, rumors swirled, but he refused to let speculation define him. He worked tirelessly in the studio, recording until his body could no longer keep pace. His final performances on record, including the haunting These Are the Days of Our Lives, seemed like whispered farewells to a world he knew he would soon leave. When the truth was finally spoken, it was with honesty and bravery, a decision that shattered stigma and brought AIDS into the conversation of millions who had looked away. The aftermath was immediate and immense. Fellow artists, from Elton John to David Bowie, hailed his genius and mourned his absence. In April 1992, the Freddie Mercury tribute concert filled Wembley Stadium with voices raised not only in song but in awareness of the epidemic that had taken him. His ashes were quietly scattered by Mary Austin, his lifelong confidant, their location never revealed. In death, as in life, Freddie Mercury commanded mystery, reverence, and awe. His music still roars from stadiums and radios, a testament that even though AIDS ended his life, it could never silence his legacy. Number 2. Rock Hudson. On October the 2nd, 1985, Rock Hudson died in Beverly Hills at the age of 59. The news stunned America because Hudson had long been celebrated as the embodiment of Hollywood masculinity, the leading man whose charm defined romance on screen. His death was the first high-profile case that forced the public to confront the reality of AIDS, and it shattered the illusion that the disease only belonged to the margins of society. Born Roy Harold Scherer Jr. in Illinois in 1925, he reinvented himself with the name Rock Hudson, a symbol of strength and glamour. Signed by Universal Pictures in the 1940s, he quickly rose to prominence with his tall frame, square jaw, and magnetic smile. He starred in a series of romantic comedies alongside Doris Day, where their chemistry became legendary, and he won critical acclaim with his performance in the epic film Giant opposite Elizabeth Taylor and James Dean. For decades, audiences saw him as the perfect leading man, an icon of post-war Hollywood success. Privately, Hudson lived with a secret that the industry demanded he hide. As a gay man in an era of strict studio control, he maintained a carefully managed image, including a brief marriage, while keeping his personal life guarded from the press. By the early 1980s, as the AIDS crisis grew, his health began to falter. When he appeared gaunt and weakened at a press event in Paris in 1985, rumors escalated. Shortly afterward, he released a statement confirming he had AIDS, becoming the first major Hollywood star to acknowledge living with the illness. The impact was seismic. His confession turned global attention toward the epidemic and gave the crisis a human face that millions could recognize. Friends like Elizabeth Taylor rallied, with Taylor later becoming a leading advocate for AIDS research, founding organizations that continue to this day. Tributes poured in from across the world, not only for his cinematic legacy, but also for the courage it took to speak the truth at a time when fear and stigma silenced many others. Rock Hudson was buried at Forest Lawn Memorial Park, His death marked a turning point in the history of both Hollywood and public health awareness. Though AIDS ended his life, it also forced the world to look directly at a disease too long ignored, and his legacy became more than just film. It became a story of visibility, bravery, and change. Number 3, Liberace. On February the 4th, 1987, Liberace died at his Palm Springs home at the age of 67. His passing was officially attributed to heart failure, but it was later confirmed that AIDS had been the underlying cause. The revelation shocked the entertainment world, for Liberace had spent his life cultivating an image of opulence, humor, and dazzling showmanship, while carefully shielding the truth of his private battles from the public eye. Born Wadzu Valentino Liberace in Wisconsin in 1919, he displayed prodigious musical talent from an early age. By his teens, he was performing with orchestras, and in the decades that followed, he built a career unlike any other in American entertainment. His signature style blended classical training with pop melodies, flamboyant costumes, and extravagant stage sets that turned every performance into a spectacle. Audiences adored his charm, his wit, and the sense that he was letting them into a glamorous, larger-than-life fantasy. During the 1950s and 1960s, Liberace became one of the highest-paid entertainers in the world. His Las Vegas residencies drew massive crowds, and his television appearances made him a household name. Clad in glittering capes, adorned with candelabras, and accompanied by self-deprecating jokes, he created a persona that balanced excess with endearment. The press frequently speculated about his sexuality, but he denied such claims, even suing tabloids for libel in order to maintain the image that protected his career. By the early 1980s, his health began to decline. Though his appearance grew frailer, he continued performing for as long as he could, refusing to let illness define his final years. In the last months of his life, the secrecy surrounding his condition became a topic of media frenzy. When he died, his physicians initially withheld the truth, but an autopsy confirmed AIDS-related complications. The disclosure forced the world to reconcile the glittering image of Liberace with the hidden suffering he endured. Tributes poured in from fellow performers and fans who had admired his artistry for decades. He was laid to rest at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Los Angeles. Today, Liberace is remembered not only for his unmatched contributions to show business, but also as a reminder of how stigma and fear shaped the final chapters of many lives during the height of the AIDS crisis. His legacy endures in music, in performance, and in the undeniable joy he gave to audiences around the world. Number 4, Anthony Perkins. On September the 12th, 1992, Anthony Perkins died in Los Angeles at the age of 60. His death came after a long and private struggle with AIDS, a disease he kept hidden from the public until the very end. When the news broke, it startled fans who remembered him not as a man in failing health, but as the unforgettable face of Norman Bates in Alfred Hitchcock's masterpiece, Psycho. Born in New York City in 1932, Perkins was the son of stage and screen actor Osgood Perkins. He grew up immersed in the world of performance and quickly developed his own talent for acting. His breakthrough came in the 1950s when he appeared in Friendly Persuasion, a role that earned him an Academy Award nomination. Yet it was in 1960, with his chilling portrayal of Norman Bates, that he secured his place in cinema history. The character's eerie charm and unsettling duality became iconic, and Perkins himself was forever linked to the role. Although Psycho made him a star, it also typecast him. Perkins spent much of his career navigating between horror sequels, stage work, and television appearances. He remained an actor of great sensitivity, often bringing vulnerability to roles that might otherwise have been one-dimensional. Behind the screen, however, he guarded his private life carefully. Hollywood in the mid-20th century was unforgiving to openly gay actors, and Perkins maintained a discreet existence while quietly building relationships and friendships within the industry. By the 1980s, he faced a new battle as AIDS began to take its toll. He continued to work through the illness, even directing and starring in later installments of the Psycho series. In his final years, he collaborated with his wife, photographer Barry Berenson, raising their 2 sons while maintaining his dignity in the face of deteriorating health. His statement before death reflected his resilience, acknowledging the disease but emphasizing the joy he had found in life and the strength of his family. The response to his passing was marked by both grief and admiration. Fans mourned not only the loss of an actor who had defined a genre, but also a man whose personal struggles mirrored the challenges of countless others in the same era. Anthony Perkins was laid to rest in Hollywood Hills, remembered as a brilliant actor whose most famous role forever redefined cinematic horror, and whose quiet fight against AIDS revealed a courage few had seen on screen. Number 5. Keith Haring. On February the 16th, 1990, Keith Haring died in New York City at the age of 31. His passing cut short the life of one of the most vibrant and influential artists of his generation. For much of the 1980s, his bold lines, radiant colors, and dancing figures had captured the pulse of the city, transforming subways and streets into galleries that everyone could access. His death confirmed what many had feared, that the AIDS epidemic was robbing the world of voices far too young. Born in Pennsylvania in 1958, Haring moved to New York in 1978 to study at the School of Visual Arts. The energy of the city and its underground culture became his canvas. Armed with chalk, he turned empty black advertising panels in subway stations into spaces alive with imagery. His figures leapt, twirled, and glowed, carrying messages of joy, unity, and sometimes warning. People began to recognize his style instantly, and by the early 1980s, he was being celebrated in galleries while still staying true to his roots in public art. Haring's career expanded rapidly. He collaborated with artists like Andy Warhol and musicians such as Madonna, bridging high art and pop culture with ease. His pop shop, opened in 1986, sold affordable items featuring his designs, making art accessible to people who might never set foot in a gallery. His work was not just decoration but also activism, often addressing social issues including apartheid, nuclear disarmament, and drug abuse. When AIDS entered his life, he used the same bold style to raise awareness, creating pieces that carried urgency and compassion. In 1988, Haring was diagnosed with AIDS. He faced the disease with the same intensity that defined his art, founding the Keith Haring Foundation the following year to support children's programs and AIDS organizations. His final works bore a raw honesty, depicting the fear, anger, and determination of living with an illness that was claiming countless lives around him. After his death, tributes came from across the globe. His murals remained on city walls, his imagery continued to inspire campaigns, and his foundation carried on his mission of advocacy and outreach. Keith Haring's legacy endures not just in museums, but in the streets, where his art first spoke to ordinary people. His story is that of an artist who gave everything to make the world brighter, even as his own light was fading. Number 6. Halston. On March 26, 1990, Halston died in San Francisco at the age of 57. His death marked the end of a career that had once defined American fashion with simplicity, elegance, and glamour. Known for dressing the most famous women of the 20th century, Halston's fall from power and his private struggle with AIDS revealed the fragility that existed behind the polished exterior of high fashion. Born Roy Halston Frowick in Des Moines, Iowa, in 1932, he discovered a love for design at an early age. After studying at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, he began working as a milliner, gaining attention for creating Jacqueline Kennedy's iconic pillbox hat worn at the presidential inauguration in 1961. That moment catapulted him into the world of fame and influence. By the late 1960s and 1970s, Halston had become a household name, known for flowing dresses, minimalist lines, and the creation of a distinctly American style that captured freedom and modernity. At the height of his success, Halston's empire stretched from high-end boutiques to affordable lines at department stores. Celebrities like Liza Minnelli, Bianca Jagger, and Elizabeth Taylor wore his designs, while Studio 54 became the nightly stage where his creations shimmered under the lights. His business acumen, however, could not protect him from missteps. A controversial deal with a mass retailer diluted his brand, and by the mid-1980s, he had lost control of the company that bore his name. Amid the business struggles, his health declined. In 1988, Halston was diagnosed with AIDS. He withdrew from the public eye and moved to San Francisco, where he sought treatment while living quietly among close friends. His once commanding figure grew frail, but he faced the illness with quiet resilience. The glamorous man who had once dressed the world's elite now spent his final years away from the spotlight, reflecting on a career that had reshaped fashion but had also been marked by heartbreak. Tributes after his death recognized him as a visionary who brought ease and sophistication to American clothing. His designs remain timeless, studied in museums, and remembered as symbols of a transformative era. Halston's life story is one of brilliance and loss, a reminder of how AIDS struck not only the marginalized, but also the celebrated architects of culture. His legacy endures in every clean line, flowing fabric, and bold choice that defined his work. Number 7. Robert Mapplethorpe. On March 9, 1989, Robert Mapplethorpe died in Boston at the age of 42. His death from complications of AIDS silenced a photographer whose images had redefined the boundaries of art, beauty, and controversy. For more than a decade, his lens had captured both the elegance of classical form and the raw intensity of underground culture, sparking debates that reached beyond galleries and into the halls of politics. Born in Queens, New York in 1946, Mapplethorpe grew up with an early fascination for visual expression. He studied at the Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, where he experimented with mixed media before focusing on photography. By the 1970s, he was part of New York's vibrant art scene, forging friendships with musicians, poets, and performers who shared his fearless pursuit of self-expression. One of his closest companions was singer Patti Smith, whose memoir later immortalized their bond and creative journey. Mapplethorpe's work ranged from serene, still lifes and delicate portraits to highly provocative explorations of sexuality. His images of flowers, statues, and the human body revealed a classical eye for balance and symmetry. At the same time, his photographs of gay subculture and S&M scenes challenged public notions of decency in art, igniting both admiration and outrage. To some, he was a genius who elevated photography to high art. To others, he was a provocateur who tested society's limits. In 1986, Mapplethorpe was diagnosed with AIDS. Rather than retreating, he used his final years to cement his artistic legacy. He established the Robert Mapplethorpe Foundation to support photography and fund medical research into AIDS and HIV. His later portraits, often stark and unflinching, seemed to confront mortality itself, turning the camera inward even as his health failed. Exhibitions of his work in the late 1980s drew both acclaim and controversy, with critics praising his technical mastery and politicians decrying his explicit subjects. When he died, tributes poured in from the art world and beyond. Friends and collaborators remembered his fearless vision, while debates over his photographs continued to shape conversations about censorship, art, and freedom of expression. Robert Mapplethorpe's legacy lives on not only in museums, but in the broader dialogue about who decides what art can be. His story remains a reminder that creativity often thrives at the edge of acceptance, where beauty and defiance meet. Number 8. Rudolf Nureyev. On January 6, 1993, Rudolf Nureyev died in Paris at the age of 54. His death ended the life of one of the greatest dancers of the 20th century, a man whose leaps in magnetic presence had redefined ballet for modern audiences. The announcement confirmed what many had suspected for years, that AIDS had claimed another towering figure of culture. Born in 1938 near Irkutsk in the Soviet Union, Nureyev grew up in poverty, but discovered dance as a form of escape and expression. He trained at the Leningrad Choreographic School and quickly distinguished himself with a combination of athletic power and emotional artistry. By the early 1960s, he was already a star of the Kirov Ballet, but he longed for freedom beyond the restrictions of Soviet life. In 1961, while on tour in Paris, he defected to the West, an act that shocked the world and made headlines far beyond the arts pages. In the years that followed, Nureyev became a sensation. Partnering with Margot Fonteyn of the Royal Ballet, he brought a new vitality to classical works and introduced ballet to audiences who had never before felt its electricity. His charisma, daring interpretations, and fiery personality made him as much a cultural icon as an artist. Beyond performance, he appeared in films, choreographed, and eventually took leadership roles, including as director of the Paris Opera Ballet. By the mid-1980s, rumors about his health grew. The once tireless dancer began to appear frail, and whispers of AIDS surrounded him. Nureyev refused to let illness strip him of dignity. He continued to appear in public, often conducting rehearsals and attending premieres even as the disease weakened him. In 1991, he was present for the opening of his production of La Bayadère at the Paris Opera, a moment many regarded as his final triumph. When he died in 1993, tributes poured in from across the globe, Colleagues described him as a revolutionary who expanded the possibilities of dance. He was buried in Sainte-Geneviève-des-Bois Cemetery near Paris, his grave marked by a mosaic resembling an oriental rug, symbolizing his restless journey across cultures and continents. Rudolf Nureyev's story remains that of a man who danced with defiance against limitations, whose brilliance could not be dimmed even as AIDS closed the curtain on his extraordinary life. Number 9. Denholm Elliott. On October the 6th, 1992, Denholm Elliott died in Ibiza, Spain, at the age of 70. His death from AIDS-related tuberculosis stunned many who remembered him as one of Britain's most versatile actors, beloved on both sides of the Atlantic. Though often cast in supporting roles, his performances carried depth, wit, and humanity that made him unforgettable in every film he touched. Born in London in 1922, Elliott discovered his love of acting after serving in the Royal Air Force during the Second World War. He trained at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, where his natural ease on stage quickly became evident. By the 1950s and 1960s, he was appearing regularly in British cinema and television, building a reputation as a reliable character actor with an expressive face and impeccable timing. Hollywood audiences came to know him best in the 1980s, when he appeared in a series of high-profile films. He charmed viewers as Marcus Brody, the bumbling but endearing museum curator in Raiders of the Lost Ark and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. He also earned critical acclaim for his role in A Room with a View, which brought him an Academy Award nomination. His ability to shift seamlessly from comedy to drama made him a favorite of directors and audiences alike. Elliott's personal life was marked by discretion. He was openly bisexual among friends, but remained private in the public eye. In 1987, it was revealed that he had been diagnosed with HIV. Even as his health declined, he continued working, determined to contribute as long as possible. His final years were spent quietly in Ibiza, where he lived with his wife Susan Robinson. The announcement of his death brought tributes from across the film community. Colleagues praised his generosity, his professionalism, and the warmth he brought to every set. For many fans, the news was a painful reminder of how AIDS had touched even those who seemed far removed from the cultural centers of New York or Los Angeles. Denholm Elliott was buried in Ibiza, leaving behind a body of work that continues to resonate with viewers. His legacy endures through characters that remain vivid decades later, proof that even in supporting roles, a gifted actor can leave a permanent mark on cinema history. Number 10. Alvin Ailey. On December the 1st, 1989, Alvin Ailey died in New York City at the age of 58. His death from AIDS-related complications silenced a visionary choreographer who had transformed modern dance and given a powerful voice to African American culture on the world stage. The announcement struck deeply in the artistic community, for Ailey had built not only a career of brilliance, but an institution that continues to shape dance today. Born in Rogers, Texas in 1931, Ailey grew up during the harsh realities of the Great Depression and the segregated South. His early experiences of church services, blues, music, and the struggles of his community later became the emotional foundation of his choreography. He moved to Los Angeles as a teenager, where a chance encounter with dance classes opened a path that would define his life. Inspired by modern dance pioneers such as Lester Horton, he joined Horton's company and developed both his technique and his vision. In 1958, Ailey founded the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater in New York. His mission was clear: to celebrate the richness of African American cultural expression while making dance accessible to all. His signature work, Revelations, premiered that same year and quickly became one of the most performed ballets in the world. Through sweeping movements and spiritual music, it captured both sorrow and triumph, resonating with audiences regardless of background. As his company grew, Ailey became a cultural ambassador. He toured internationally, bringing modern dance to countries where it had never been seen. He nurtured generations of dancers, giving opportunities to those who had long been excluded from elite institutions. His choreography blended ballet, modern dance, jazz, and gospel influences, creating a style that was distinctly his own and universally admired. By the mid-1980s, his health began to falter. Though he kept his illness private, those close to him noticed his decline. Even in his final years, he continued to oversee the company, ensuring that his vision would endure beyond his lifetime. His death in 1989 was a profound loss, but his legacy was immediately visible in the dancers he had trained and the audiences he had inspired. Today, the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater remains a leading force in global dance. Alvin Ailey is remembered not only for his artistry, but for the way he opened doors, told stories through movement, and gave dignity and celebration to a community too often overlooked. Number 11, Sylvester. On December the 16th, 1988, Sylvester died in San Francisco at the age of 41. His death from AIDS complications ended the life of a singer who had become a defining voice of disco and a fearless symbol of self-expression. Known simply by his first name, Sylvester commanded stages with soaring falsetto notes, glittering costumes, and an unapologetic embrace of his identity at a time when few dared to be so open. Born Sylvester James Jr. in Los Angeles in 1947, he grew up in a deeply religious community where his musical talent was nurtured through gospel singing. As a young man, he gravitated toward the vibrant counterculture of San Francisco, where he found acceptance and artistic freedom. There, he became involved with the avant-garde performance collective called the Coquettes, whose blend of drag, theater, and satire mirrored his own flair for breaking boundaries. By the mid-1970s, Sylvester had launched a solo career that quickly caught fire. His album Step 2 produced the disco anthems You Make Me Feel Mighty Real and Dance Disco Heat, songs that lit up dance floors across the world. His music celebrated joy, liberation, and love, while his flamboyant style made him a star in both the gay community and the mainstream. With his sequin outfits, dramatic wigs, and commanding stage presence, he challenged traditional notions of gender and performance. As disco waned in popularity during the early 1980s, Sylvester remained a beloved figure in clubs and pride celebrations. His voice continued to soar in gospel-inspired ballads and dance tracks alike. Yet behind the glitter and energy, his health began to decline. By 1987, he had been diagnosed with AIDS. Unlike many celebrities who chose silence, Sylvester confronted the disease publicly, using his fame to raise awareness and calling for compassion in a time marked by fear and stigma. In his final months, he planned his legacy with care. He directed that future royalties from his music be donated to AIDS organizations, ensuring that his voice would continue to support the fight long after he was gone. When he died, fans filled the streets of San Francisco in celebration and mourning, singing his songs and remembering the freedom he represented. Sylvester was laid to rest in Los Angeles, but his legacy lives on wherever disco still plays. His music remains a powerful anthem for resilience and pride, a reminder that even in the face of tragedy, joy can be an act of defiance. Number 12, Pedro Zamora. On November the 11th, 1994, Pedro Zamora died in Miami at the age of 22. His passing was broadcast to the world through the lens of reality television, making him one of the most public faces of the AIDS crisis in America. Only hours earlier, the final episode of his season on The Real World San Francisco had aired, leaving viewers stunned as fiction and reality collided in the harshest way possible. Born in Havana, Cuba, in 1972, Zamora came to the United States with his family as part of the Mariel boat lift in 1980. He grew up in Miami, excelling in school, while also discovering his identity as a gay man. In his teenage years, he received an HIV diagnosis, a revelation that propelled him into activism rather than silence. Instead of retreating, he began speaking publicly about the disease, determined to educate young people and dispel the fear that surrounded it. By the early 1990s, Zamora had become a well-known advocate, lecturing in schools, appearing on talk shows, and challenging misconceptions. His courage and openness caught the attention of MTV, which invited him to join the cast of The Real World. Through the program, he brought the AIDS epidemic into living rooms across the nation. His honesty about his condition, his relationship with his partner Sean Sasser, and his struggles with declining health gave a human face to a crisis many still tried to ignore. As his health worsened, Zamora continued to speak out. He testified before the United States Congress, urging lawmakers to understand the urgent need for education and compassion. His time on The Real World ended with his hospitalization, and he spent his final days surrounded by family and loved ones. His death at such a young age became a symbol of both the devastation of the epidemic and the power of visibility. The response was immediate and far-reaching. President Bill Clinton praised Zamora for his bravery, acknowledging that his openness had done more to educate young Americans than many official campaigns. Sean Sasser, who stood by him throughout, became an activist in his own right, carrying forward the mission they had shared. Pedro Zamora was laid to rest in Miami. His life, though short, left a profound impact, transforming the perception of AIDS and giving a voice to young people living with the disease. His legacy remains in the ongoing fight for awareness, compassion, and change. Number 13, Ricky Wilson. On October the 12th, 1985, Ricky Wilson died in New York City at the age of 32. His death, caused by complications from AIDS, stunned fans of the B-52 Seconds, the quirky new wave band whose sound had defined much of the late 1970s and early 1980s. At the time of his passing, the band was riding a wave of popularity, and his sudden absence left both the group and its fans in deep shock. Born in Athens, Georgia, in 1953, Ricky Wilson grew up surrounded by music and creativity. Alongside his sister Cindy and friends Fred Schneider, Kate Pearson, and Keith Strickland, he co-founded the B-52 Seconds in 1976. With his distinctive guitar sound, marked by odd tunings and jangly rhythms, Wilson gave the band its unmistakable edge. Songs like Rock Lobster and Planet Claire showcased not only his innovative style, but also the playful energy that made the group stand out in a crowded music scene. By the early 1980s, the B-52 Seconds had achieved international success, celebrated for their eccentric costumes, offbeat humor, and danceable hits. Wilson, quiet and reserved compared to some of his flamboyant bandmates, was nonetheless the musical backbone of the group. His guitar riffs shaped their identity, creating a sound that blended surf, rock, punk, and pop into something entirely unique. Behind the scenes, however, he was facing a battle few knew about. In 1983, Wilson was diagnosed with AIDS. Choosing to keep his illness private, he confided in only a small circle of friends and family. Even as his health declined, he continued to tour and record, determined to contribute to the band he loved. The strain of illness became increasingly evident, but Wilson never allowed it to eclipse his artistry. His final work with the band included the recording of their album Bouncing Off the Satellites, which was released after his death. When news of his passing reached the public, fans were devastated. The album became a tribute to his memory, though its release was subdued as the surviving band members grappled with grief. The B-52 Seconds eventually regrouped, and in later years they often spoke of Wilson's quiet genius and his lasting influence on their music. Ricky Wilson was laid to rest in Georgia. His contributions to music remain alive in every eccentric chord and joyful lyric of the B-52 Seconds. Though AIDS ended his life far too soon, his sound continues to echo through generations of alternative rock and pop. These 13 lives, though cut short, left an indelible mark on music, film, dance, and art. Each story reminds us how the AIDS crisis reshaped not only personal destinies, but also the cultural landscape of America. Their talent burned brightly, their courage spoke volumes, and their legacies endure in every song, every performance, and every creation they left behind. If these stories moved you, subscribe to Tragic Hollywood so together we can continue honoring the stars who left us too soon.